A shy girl schedules a private surgery, but when she meets her millionaire young doctor, she wants. A shy girl, overwhelmed with nerves, is about to schedule an important private surgery. Little does she know, the young doctor she's about to meet is not just any doctor. He's a millionaire in disguise. But will she ever realize that this simple surgery could change her life forever? Let's find out. The days passed quickly, and soon Sarah found herself back at Dr. Matthew Gray's office for the second consultation. Her heart raced as she stepped into the building once again, the same nervousness bubbling inside her. This time, though, there was something different. There was an unease she couldn't quite explain. The promise of a fresh start, of healing, lingered in the air, but so did the uncertainty about what was to come. Would this surgery really change her life, or was she just chasing an illusion of control? She couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Gray, the way he had looked at her with such understanding, like he truly saw her. It felt strange but comforting. When she entered the office, Dr. Gray was waiting, as always, with that confident yet warm smile of his. He was sitting at his desk, reviewing some papers, but when he saw her, he stood up and greeted her with his usual calm presence. "Sarah, it's good to see you again," he said. There was a hint of sincerity in his voice that caught her off guard. "How have you been feeling since our last meeting?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before answering. "Better, I think. But also nervous," she confessed, her voice soft. She wasn't sure why she was telling him this. It was just a surgery, right? Something she'd been planning for months. But there was something about him that made her feel like she could share her worries, even the ones she hadn't voiced to anyone else. "Nervous is natural," he replied. "It's a big decision, and I understand how it feels. But trust me, you're making the right choice. And I'll be with you every step of the way." His reassurance felt genuine, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah believed him. They went over the details of the surgery again. He explained everything clearly, making sure Sarah understood what would happen before, during, and after the procedure. As he spoke, she couldn't help but notice how effortlessly he explained everything, how confident he was in his knowledge. There was a certain ease to the way he interacted with her, a sense that he wasn't just a doctor. He was someone who cared. But it wasn't just that. There was a subtle feeling of admiration in his eyes that Sarah couldn't ignore. It was as if he saw something in her that others didn't, or perhaps something she hadn't seen in herself for a long time. "You have nothing to worry about, Sarah," Dr. Gray said, breaking her thoughts. "You're in good hands. And when this is over, you'll be able to look at yourself in a way you never have before." His words hung in the air, heavy with promise. Sarah swallowed, trying to push aside the nerves building up in her chest. He was right, she reminded herself. She needed this. She had to go through with it. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I trust you." Dr. Gray smiled, a smile that seemed to carry both kindness and something deeper, something she wasn't quite sure of yet. "Good," he said, standing up. "Now let's get this scheduled. I'll have my assistant arrange everything. You're going to be just fine, Sarah." As she left the office, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Dr. Gray than he let on. She knew he was a doctor. She had seen his credentials, heard about his expertise, but there was something about him that seemed different. Something almost too perfect, too flawless to be real. She didn't know what it was, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he looked at her, the way he spoke with such conviction. Was he really just doing his job, or was there more? And why did she feel so drawn to him, even though she barely knew him? She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. She needed to focus on herself, on her surgery, on getting better. She didn't have time for distractions. But as she walked down the hallway of the clinic, she caught a glimpse of something, a glint of something shiny. She turned her head, and for a split second, she saw Dr. Gray walking through the hallway, his gaze locked on her. Their eyes met, and she felt a jolt of recognition, a spark that she couldn't explain. It was like he was looking right through her, as if he could see straight into her soul. Sarah quickly looked away, feeling her heart race in her chest. Was it just her imagination, or had something passed between them in that brief moment? She couldn't be sure, but it was enough to make her wonder. The next few days passed in a blur. Sarah kept herself busy, focused on the preparations for her surgery, but the thoughts of Dr. Gray lingered in the back of her mind. She tried to shake them off, but it was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, his face appeared in her thoughts. The way he smiled at her, the way he spoke to her, as if she mattered. And with each passing day, the curiosity about him grew. Who was he really? Was he just the successful, confident doctor he appeared to be, or was there more to him than met the eye? Sarah knew she couldn't keep ignoring these questions. She had to find out more. But how? The day of the surgery arrived, and with it came a wave of both fear and excitement. This was it, the moment that could change everything. Sarah arrived at the hospital early, her heart pounding in her chest. She had barely slept the night before, the anticipation keeping her awake. As she was being prepped for the procedure, she couldn't help but think about Dr. Gray. She had a feeling that the answers to her questions were just around the corner. And whatever she discovered, it would be life-changing. The day of the surgery arrived, and Sarah was filled with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She woke up early, her heart pounding in her chest, the uncertainty about the procedure and the doctor still lingering in her mind. She had spent the last few days distracting herself, focusing on the preparations and getting everything in order. But now, as she sat in the sterile waiting room of the hospital, she couldn't help but wonder about Dr. Matthew Gray. The moment he had looked at her in the hallway a few days ago, something had shifted in her, something she didn't fully understand, but it felt like more than just a simple connection between doctor and patient. She pushed the thoughts aside as the nurse came to call her name. "Miss Sarah, Dr. Gray is ready for you." Sarah followed the nurse down the hall, the familiar scent of antiseptic filling the air. She had always hated hospitals, but today felt different. Today, there was a sense of hope, a chance to finally take control of her life again. The door to the operating room opened, and Sarah stepped inside, where Dr. Gray was already waiting. He was standing next to the surgical table, looking professional as ever, but there was something about his demeanor that made her pause. He wasn't just her doctor anymore. There was an air of confidence, of reassurance, and yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than he let on. "Sarah, I'm glad to see you here today," Dr. Gray said, his voice calm, but with a sincerity that immediately put her at ease. "How are you feeling?" She smiled nervously, trying to mask the anxiety in her voice. "Nervous, but I'm ready. I trust you," she said, her voice soft but steady. Dr. Gray gave her a reassuring smile and nodded. "I'm going to take good care of you," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "You're in excellent hands." For a moment, Sarah forgot about everything. The surgery, the nerves, and even the strange connection she felt to Dr. Gray. All that mattered was that he was there, and she believed him. He was the one person who made her feel safe in a world that had often felt so overwhelming. The procedure began, and Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness as the anesthesia took effect. As she lay there, her mind wandered, and once again, she thought about Dr. Gray. She couldn't help but wonder about the man behind the mask of the doctor. Who was he really? Why did he seem so different from everyone else she had ever met? She had heard rumors about him. The millionaire doctor with a reputation for being private and elusive, someone who didn't share much about his personal life. But now, in the quiet of the operating room, she began to realize that there was a lot more to him than just his medical expertise. As the surgery continued, Sarah drifted into a dreamlike state, but in the back of her mind, she kept hearing Dr. Gray's words, "You're in excellent hands." Those words had a soothing effect on her, but they also made her feel like there was something more she needed to uncover. After what seemed like hours, Sarah slowly began to regain consciousness. She blinked her eyes open and found herself lying in a recovery room, the sterile white walls surrounding her. The first thing she noticed was that Dr. Gray was standing beside her, his expression unreadable. He was holding a clipboard, his gaze focused on her as she slowly came to. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and soothing. "How are you feeling?" Sarah took a deep breath, the effects of the anesthesia still heavy in her body, but she managed a weak smile. "I feel okay. Tired, but okay." Dr. Gray nodded, taking a step closer. "That's normal. The surgery went well. We'll keep you here for a while to monitor your recovery, but you should be good to go in a few hours." She nodded, grateful for his reassurance, but her thoughts were elsewhere. As she looked at him, something clicked in her mind. There was a quiet strength in the way he carried himself, something magnetic that drew her in. She had seen it before. He was hiding something. She just couldn't figure out what it was yet. "Thank you, Dr. Gray," she said, her voice shaky but sincere. "You've done so much for me." He smiled warmly at her, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. "It's my job, Sarah," he said, his voice still calm, but there was a hint of something else in his words. "You don't need to thank me." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. Dr. Gray wasn't just a doctor doing his job. He was someone who cared, someone who had been there for her when she needed it most. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that her connection with him wasn't just about the surgery. It was about something deeper, something unspoken that neither of them had addressed yet. As the hours passed and Sarah's recovery continued, she began to reflect on everything that had happened so far. The surgery had been a success, but more than that, it had marked a turning point in her life. It wasn't just about the physical healing. It was about the emotional journey she had started, and it was clear to her now that Dr. Gray had become an unexpected part of it. The questions she had about him still lingered in her mind, but for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt hopeful. Whatever the future held, she knew one thing for sure. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. As the days went by, Sarah continued to recover from her surgery, but the questions about Dr. Matthew Gray and the strange connection she felt to him kept resurfacing. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that there was more to the story than he was letting on. She had tried to push the thoughts aside, focusing on her physical healing, but it was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, his calm demeanor, the way he looked at her with an intensity that made her feel both seen and, at the same time, like she was missing something. 2 weeks had passed since the surgery, and Sarah had been feeling better. The pain had subsided, and her energy was returning, but it was her mind that was restless. She had taken a few days off from work to recover, but now, she felt ready to get back to her routine. She stepped out of her apartment one morning, taking a deep breath of fresh air as she walked to the bus stop. Her mind was still on Dr. Gray, and she couldn't help but think about their last conversation. There was something about the way he had looked at her, something beyond professional concern. Was it just her imagination, or was there something more? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her best friend, Jenny, asking how she was feeling after the surgery. Sarah smiled at the message but didn't respond immediately. Her mind was too preoccupied with Dr. Gray. She didn't know why, but she felt an overwhelming need to find out more about him, to understand why she couldn't stop thinking about him. She had Googled his name a few times, but all she found were medical articles and mentions of his expertise. There was nothing personal about him online, no social media profiles, or any hints of his private life. He seemed almost too perfect, too carefully hidden. Sarah had always admired people who were genuine, who didn't hide behind facades, but Dr. Gray, he was different. The next day, after finishing her shift at the cafe, Sarah decided to take a walk around the city to clear her mind. She found herself at a small park near the hospital where Dr. Gray worked. The park was quiet, with only a few people walking their dogs or sitting on the benches. She sat down on a bench, her thoughts still on the mystery of the young, successful doctor who had helped her change her life. It was then that she saw him. Dr. Gray was walking across the park, his steps purposeful, as if he was heading somewhere important. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, and she hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should she approach him? Was it too forward? But before she could make up her mind, he turned in her direction and caught sight of her. His face lit up with a smile that was both warm and genuine. "Sarah," he said, his voice a pleasant surprise in the quiet of the park. "What are you doing here?" Sarah stood up, caught off guard by the encounter. I was just walking around," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I didn't expect to see you here." Dr. Gray walked closer, his presence making her feel both nervous and strangely comforted. "I take walks here sometimes," he said, pausing in front of her. "It's a good place to clear my head. How are you feeling? Recovering well?" Sarah nodded, her nerves still on edge. "Yes, much better. Thank you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been feeling good. It's just hard to believe everything that's changed." Dr. Gray looked at her intently, his expression thoughtful. "Change is always difficult," he said, his eyes softening. "But sometimes it's necessary. It's good to see you doing well." There was a pause, a silence that seemed to stretch between them. For a moment, it felt like time had slowed down. Sarah could feel her heart racing, the connection between them growing stronger. She had no idea what it was, But something about Dr. Gray made her want to know more, to break through the barrier he had built around himself. Dr. Gray, she started, her voice tentative. I've been wondering, you seem so private. I've looked for information about you, but there's nothing personal about you online. Why is that? Dr. Gray's smile faded slightly, and he took a deep breath before speaking. I value my privacy, he said simply. I don't feel the need to share everything about my life with the world. My work is what matters most to me, and it's important to me that people focus on that. Sarah nodded, but something about his words didn't sit right with her. She wasn't sure why, but it felt like he was holding something back. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, but there was also something guarded, something he wasn't telling her. I understand, she said, though she wasn't sure if she did. But I can't help but wonder who you really are, beyond the doctor. Dr. Gray looked at her, his gaze intense. For a moment, it felt like he was deciding whether to reveal something more. But then, he simply smiled again, the same reassuring smile he had given her before. Maybe one day, Sarah, he said, his tone soft but mysterious. Maybe one day you'll understand. Sarah felt a twinge of disappointment, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. There was something about him that was impossible to ignore. As they said their goodbyes and Dr. Gray walked away, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning. She had no idea where it would lead, but one thing was clear. She needed to know the truth about Dr. Gray, and she would stop at nothing to find out. The following week, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about her encounter with Dr. Matthew Gray. She had gone over every word, every glance, trying to decipher the meaning behind his guarded responses. Something about their meeting had stirred something inside her, a curiosity, a yearning to understand the man behind the doctor's mask. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that there was a lot more to Dr. Gray than he let on. But how could she uncover the truth without crossing any boundaries? She didn't want to be intrusive, but her mind wouldn't let her rest. Every time she passed by the hospital or saw his name on an article online, her thoughts would wander back to him. He had told her, maybe one day, you'll understand. But when would that day come? And why did she feel so drawn to him? Sarah had never been one to chase after mysteries, but this one felt different. As the weekend approached, she decided to take a step forward and try to learn more. She knew she couldn't just sit back and wait for answers. There was something about Dr. Gray, something about the way he looked at her, the way he spoke, that made her feel like he was hiding something significant. Maybe she could find out more through subtlety, through observation. The next day, Sarah returned to the hospital. She hadn't made an appointment or anything, but she figured she could at least stop by to see if she could catch a glimpse of Dr. Gray, maybe have another casual conversation. As she entered the building, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Her footsteps echoed in the quiet hallway as she made her way to the elevator. It was then that she saw him. Dr. Gray was walking toward her, dressed in his usual impeccable suit, carrying a stack of files in his hands. His eyes met hers, and once again, she felt that same strange connection. This time, however, he didn't just smile and keep walking. Instead, he stopped. Sarah, he said, his voice low and warm, a hint of surprise in his tone. What are you doing here? Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. I just wanted to check in, she said, nervously adjusting the strap of her bag. I'm feeling great, and I wanted to see if everything's going well. She immediately regretted the words. It sounded forced, even to her own ears. But Dr. Gray didn't seem to mind. He looked at her for a moment, his gaze intense, before nodding. I'm glad to hear that. You're doing well, then, he said. There was a pause, an awkward silence that seemed to stretch between them. Dr. Gray then took a step closer, lowering his voice slightly. I've been meaning to ask you something, Sarah, he said, his tone shifting, as if something was weighing on him. Sarah raised an eyebrow, curious. What is it? There's something I need to tell you, he began, but then he hesitated. It was clear he was conflicted. His gaze flickered toward the door of his office, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might just brush her off and leave. But instead, he motioned for her to follow him. Come with me, he said, leading her into his office. Once inside, he closed the door behind them and turned to face her, the files now placed neatly on his desk. I never intended for you to find out, but the truth is, there's more to me than just being a doctor. Sarah stood still, her heart racing. She had known it. She had known there was more to Dr. Gray than he was letting on. But now, As he stood there, looking at her with such sincerity, she realized this moment would change everything. I wasn't entirely honest with you, he continued, his voice low. I've been watching you, Sarah, not in a creepy way, but because I felt something about you from the moment we met. His words hit her like a shock, leaving her stunned. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. You see, Dr. Gray continued, I'm not just a doctor. I'm the CEO of a major medical group, and I've built this empire from the ground up. I've kept my identity hidden, not because I wanted to deceive anyone, but because I wanted to help people without them seeing me as just another millionaire. Sarah was taken aback. The man she had seen as a comforting, caring doctor was, in fact, someone with incredible wealth and power. Yet, he had chosen to be humble, to remain hidden behind a facade of anonymity. She was speechless. I never wanted you to know who I really am, Sarah, he said, looking at her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, yet safe at the same time. But I feel like you deserve to know the truth. Sarah stood there for a moment, processing the information. The man who had taken care of her, who had made her feel valued, was not just a doctor. He was someone who had the power to change the world. And yet, he had chosen not to use that power for personal gain. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you do all of this? Dr. Gray sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because I needed to find someone who could see beyond the wealth, beyond the title. Someone who could see me for who I really am. And I think I found that in you, Sarah. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. His words sent a wave of warmth through her, but they also left her confused. She had never expected this. Never expected that the man who had helped her heal physically would be the one to heal something deeper inside her. She had always thought of herself as insignificant, but now, in this moment, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as invisible as she had always believed. Sarah stood in Dr. Gray's office, her heart racing as the weight of his words hung in the air. The man who had been her doctor, who had made her feel seen and valued in a way no one else had, was not just a doctor. He was the CEO of a major medical empire. Her mind was still trying to process everything he had just told her. The world she thought she knew, the simple world of patient and doctor, had just been turned upside down. But despite the shock, despite the revelation that Dr. Gray was hiding something so big, she couldn't bring herself to feel betrayed. Instead, she felt closer to him. He had been honest with her now, and in that moment, that honesty meant everything. Dr. Gray watched her closely, his expression softening as he saw the confusion and wonder in her eyes. I know this is a lot to take in, Sarah, he said, his voice low and sincere. And I didn't expect you to understand everything right away. I didn't want to complicate things between us, but I also didn't want to keep you in the dark. Sarah looked at him, her mind still spinning. Why didn't you just tell me sooner? She asked quietly. Why hide it all this time? He sighed, his gaze shifting toward the window. Because I've spent my life hiding behind my title, behind my wealth. I wanted to find someone who would see me for who I truly am, not just as the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I wanted to be known as Matthew, not just the man with money and power. Sarah listened intently, her heart softening as she realized the vulnerability in his words. I didn't want to disappoint you, Sarah, he continued. I wanted you to see me as a person, not as a pedestal to place me on. I didn't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. She could feel the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time, she understood why he had kept his identity a secret. He wasn't hiding from her. He was protecting her from a world he didn't want her to see. Sarah swallowed hard, the emotions swirling inside her. I get it, she said finally, her voice steady. But why me, Matthew? Why did you choose to be honest with me? He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Because you're different, Sarah. From the moment we met, I felt like you saw me. Not the CEO, not the millionaire, just me. You didn't judge me. You didn't ask for anything from me. You were real, and that's something I haven't found in a long time. Sarah's heart fluttered at his words, and she realized just how much they had connected in such a short time. What had started as a professional relationship had turned into something deeper, something neither of them had expected. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and wonder. You've already said everything that matters, Dr. Gray replied softly, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. And I want you to know that I'm here, Sarah. Not as a doctor, not as a CEO, but as Matthew. And whatever this is between us, whatever happens, I want to face it together. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For a moment, Sarah didn't know what to do. Part of her wanted to run. This was all so much, so fast. But another part of her wanted to stay, to explore this connection with him, to let herself believe that something real could come from it. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. It feels like it's all moving so fast. Dr. Gray nodded, his expression understanding. I don't expect you to have all the answers right now, he said gently. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Take your time, Sarah. Whatever you decide, I'll be here for you. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside her. Sarah felt her walls slowly starting to come down, the hesitation she had felt before melting away. This wasn't just a doctor-patient relationship anymore. This was something more, something she wasn't sure how to define yet, but it was real. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. For trusting me with this. Dr. Gray smiled softly, his eyes warm and filled with an emotion that Sarah couldn't quite place. It's my pleasure, Sarah, and thank you for being you. I don't take that for granted. Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a mix of relief and something else, something she couldn't name. Maybe it was the beginning of something new, or maybe it was just the start of a deeper understanding between them. Either way, she knew one thing for sure. Things between them had changed, and she wasn't sure where it would lead, but she was ready to find out. As she left his office that day, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about the surgery anymore. It was about the journey she was now on with Matthew. A journey that was only beginning, and one that she knew could change her life in ways she had never imagined. As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. After that day in Dr. Gray's office, everything had changed. She couldn't help but replay their conversation over and over again in her mind. He had been honest with her about everything: his wealth, his identity, his desire to find someone who saw him for who he truly was. And despite the shock of the revelation, Sarah felt a strange comfort in knowing that he trusted her with such a significant part of himself. But as much as she wanted to believe in this connection, doubts began to creep in. She wasn't used to feeling this way about someone, especially someone with so much power and influence. The idea of a relationship with Dr. Gray, a man who had the world at his feet, seemed almost too impossible. She knew she wasn't the type of woman he was used to being with. She was ordinary, unsure of herself, and far from the polished, glamorous women that surrounded him. Still, every time she saw him, that connection, that pull, was undeniable. The more they spent time together, the more Sarah realized just how much she enjoyed being in his presence. He was kind, caring, and attentive, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she mattered. Their relationship had grown slowly but steadily. Dr. Gray had been patient, never pushing her to move faster than she was comfortable with. They would meet for dinner, sometimes just to talk about their day, sometimes to share a quiet meal at his apartment, where he had prepared something simple and comforting. It wasn't just about the luxury that surrounded him. It was about the small, intimate moments they shared that made her feel connected to him. But despite their growing bond, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She still had so many unanswered questions about his life, about his past, about who he really was when he wasn't being the CEO of a billion-dollar company. And even more so, she was beginning to question her own role in his world. Would he still want her when he realized how different they were? One evening, after dinner at Dr. Gray's apartment, Sarah found herself standing on his balcony, looking out at the city lights. It was a beautiful view, but her mind was miles away. She could hear Dr. Gray's voice behind her as he walked over, his presence soothing yet somehow overwhelming. "You seem distant," he said softly, his tone concerned. Sarah turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice hesitant. "About us. About everything." Dr. Gray raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. "I don't know if I'm enough for you," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't belong in your world. You have everything, your business, your success, your future, and I'm just me, a girl who's still figuring things out." Dr. Gray's expression softened, and he stepped closer to her. "Sarah," he said gently, "you are more than enough for me. In fact, you're exactly what I've been looking for." Sarah shook her head, not fully convinced. But I'm not like the women you're used to. I'm not perfect, I don't have a glamorous life, and I don't fit in with your world. What if this is all just a dream, something that's too good to be true? Dr. Gray reached out, gently lifting her chin so that she looked into his eyes. Sarah, he said, his voice steady and full of sincerity, I don't care about the world you think I live in. I care about you. I care about who you are, your heart, your spirit. I don't need someone who's perfect. I need someone who's real. And you're the most real person I've ever met. His words hit her like a wave, washing away the doubts that had been building in her mind. She realized, in that moment, that he wasn't just talking about her. He was talking about them, about what they shared. But what about everything else? She asked quietly. The expectations, the pressure, your world, your business. Dr. Gray smiled, a soft, reassuring smile. We'll figure it out together. I'm not asking you to fit into my world, Sarah. I'm asking you to be in it with me. No matter what, I want you by my side. I've never wanted anyone the way I want you. Sarah felt the weight of his words settle into her chest, filling the empty spaces she hadn't even realized were there. For the first time, she truly believed him. She wasn't just a part of his life. She was an equal partner in it. There were no barriers, no expectations to meet. Just two people, choosing to be together. She smiled softly, her heart swelling with emotion. Okay, she whispered. I'll be with you. Dr. Gray's smile widened, his eyes softening with affection. Thank you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. I promise you, this is just the beginning. Sarah squeezed his hand gently, the connection between them stronger than ever. In that moment, she realized that their journey together wasn't about perfection or fitting into each other's worlds. It was about building something real, something that was theirs. And for the first time, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Weeks passed, and Sarah found herself adjusting to this new chapter of her life, the one she never expected to unfold. Her relationship with Dr. Matthew Gray, Matthew, as he had asked her to call him, had deepened in ways she hadn't anticipated. The walls that had once stood so tall in her heart, the doubts, the fear of not being enough, were slowly crumbling, piece by piece. Matthew had been patient, understanding, and above all, unwavering in his support for her. The insecurities that once held her back now seemed smaller, less important, as she realized that their connection was based on something real, something that transcended the differences in their worlds. They had spent time together in his apartment, at dinner, dates, and even simple walks through the park, talking about everything and nothing. He was no longer just the CEO of a successful medical empire. He was the man who saw her for who she was, the woman who had overcome so much and still had a long way to go. But despite their closeness, there was one thing Sarah hadn't yet fully addressed. She had never truly opened up to him about her own struggles, her fears, her past, and the wounds she still carried deep within. It was easy to talk about her daily life, her job, the simple things that felt safe. But when it came to the things that really mattered, the things that made her feel vulnerable, she held back. One evening, after a long day of work at the cafe, Sarah found herself sitting on the couch in Matthew's apartment. He was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, as usual, and she was watching him from the corner of the room, contemplating whether it was time to share the parts of herself she had kept hidden. She had always believed that her past was something she needed to keep buried, but as she looked at him, she realized that the foundation of their relationship, trust, understanding, and honesty, deserved nothing less than complete openness. Matthew sensed her stillness and looked over at her, his eyes soft. Something on your mind? He asked, his voice gentle. Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Matthew put down the knife he was holding and walked over to her, sitting beside her on the couch. You know you can tell me anything, he said, his hand resting on hers. She nodded, her chest tightening with the weight of the words she had kept inside for so long. I've never really talked about my past, she began. I've always tried to forget it, to move on. But I can't keep pretending like it's not there. I need you to know, about my family, about the things I've been through. Matthew's expression softened even more, and he gently squeezed her hand. You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share, he said, his voice full of compassion. But I'm here, Sarah, whenever you're ready. Sarah took a deep breath and began, her voice shaking slightly. I grew up in a difficult environment, she said. My parents were always fighting, and there was a lot of emotional chaos. It made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I could never do anything right. I never really had someone to lean on. And then, when I was in high school, things took a turn for the worse. My mom got sick, and I had to take care of her while still trying to manage school and everything else. I was so young, and it was overwhelming. After she passed, I felt completely lost. I had no idea who I was or what I was supposed to do. As she spoke, Sarah could feel the weight of those memories, those painful moments, coming back to her. She paused, feeling the tears welling up in her eyes. I've always been scared that I'm not enough, she continued, that I'm not worthy of the kind of love I want. I've carried that fear with me for so long, and sometimes it feels like it's just a part of who I am. Matthew listened in silence, his eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, he didn't say anything at first. He just pulled her into an embrace, holding her close. You are more than enough, Sarah, he whispered, his voice steady and filled with conviction. You are more than worthy of love. You've been through more than anyone should have to go through, and you came out stronger because of it. But you don't have to carry that burden alone anymore. Sarah closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his embrace wash over her. She had never felt so safe, so seen, in her entire life. For the first time, she felt like she didn't have to hide any part of herself. Matthew pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. You don't have to be perfect, he said softly. You just have to be you. And I love you for that. The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah felt something shift inside her. The fear, the doubt, the walls she had built so high, they all began to crumble in that moment. She realized that Matthew had never asked her to be perfect. He had only wanted her to be real, to be herself. And in that moment, she knew that she was ready to embrace the future they were building together. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for seeing me. Matthew smiled, his hand gently cupping her face. I've always seen you, Sarah. And I always will. The tears she had been holding back finally fell, but they were no longer tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of letting go. In Matthew's arms, Sarah finally felt like she was home. As the days went by, Sarah began to embrace the changes in her life. The life she had once thought was so far from anything extraordinary. The relationship she shared with Matthew, a man who had not only healed her physically but also emotionally, had evolved into something beautiful, something Sarah had never believed she deserved. Matthew was everything she had never expected, a man of power and success who had shown her that love, in its truest form, didn't come with conditions. It wasn't about perfection or status. It was about acceptance, trust, and a shared journey. They spent more time together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Their days were filled with quiet moments, deep conversations, and shared laughter. Matthew had made it clear that his past, his wealth, and his title didn't matter to him. What mattered was Sarah, her heart, her spirit, and the way she made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. It was hard for Sarah to believe, at first. She was still that girl who had once felt invisible, unworthy of love. But with every reassuring smile, every kind word from Matthew, she slowly started to see herself through his eyes. One evening, after a long day at work, Sarah returned to Matthew's apartment. It had become her second home, a place where she felt safe and cared for. Matthew was waiting for her, as he always was, his arms open wide. Hey you, he said, smiling warmly as she stepped inside. How was your day? She smiled back, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. It was good. Busy, but good, she replied. I've been thinking about something, though. Matthew raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. What's on your mind? Sarah hesitated for a moment, her heart racing slightly as she spoke. I know we've talked about the future before, but I want to ask you something important. Matthew's smile faded, and his expression turned serious as he nodded for her to continue. What is it? He asked softly. Sarah took a deep breath, gathering the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind for some time. Do you see us, long-term, I mean? Is this really something you want? Or are we just living in the moment? Matthew was silent for a moment, his eyes locked on hers. For a brief second, Sarah wondered if she had pushed too hard, if maybe her question was too much. But then, he stepped forward, taking her hands gently in his. "Sarah," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "From the moment I met you, I knew that there was something special about us. I didn't know what it was at first, but it became clear over time. You've brought out a part of me I didn't even know existed. You've shown me what it means to truly care, to open up, to be vulnerable." Sarah felt her chest tighten as she listened to him, her heart swelling with emotion. "I want us to be more than just something that exists in the moment," he continued. "I want to build a future with you. I see you in my life, in every way, through the highs, the lows, and everything in between. I want to be with you, Sarah. I've never been more certain about anything in my life." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she heard the sincerity in his words. It was everything she had wanted to hear, but had been too afraid to ask. "You mean that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "With everything that's happened, with everything that's still uncertain?" Matthew smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, I mean it," he said gently. "With everything. I don't care about the past or the mistakes we've both made. What matters is right now, and what comes next. What matters is you and me, together." The floodgates opened, and Sarah couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She had spent so long hiding her emotions, burying her past, and now, here she was, allowing herself to feel everything she had been too afraid to feel for so long. Matthew pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she cried. "It's okay," he whispered softly. "You're not alone anymore. We're in this together." In that moment, Sarah felt a sense of relief she had never known before. She didn't have to carry the weight of her past, her fears, or her doubts alone. Matthew had shown her that love wasn't about perfection. It was about two people coming together, imperfect and vulnerable, and building something beautiful. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. They had a future to build, one that was filled with love, trust, and the understanding that no matter what came their way, they would face it together. The journey ahead wouldn't always be easy, but with Matthew by her side, Sarah finally believed that she was ready to face whatever life had in store. They had already overcome so much, together, and now, their story was only just beginning.